The chamber smelled of smoke and ozone, a bitter reminder of the attack that had ended only hours before. Cracks still ran along the marble floor where debris had fallen, and the once golden banners of the council now sagged in tatters, half-burned. Hundreds of eyes, scaled, feathered, and glass-like, were fixed on the center platform where the hologram still played on loop. Colony worlds burning, fleets scattered, children pressed against bulkheads as fire consumed their homes. Not a word was spoken at first. The silence was heavier than the ruin around them. When it finally broke, it was not with calm debate but with shouting. They broke through the Kestrel line in less than a day, one delegate roared, pounding his clawed hand against the desk. We sent 30 carriers and not one survived. Your carriers were outdated, another hissed. We told you centuries ago to upgrade your systems. Do not now demand we all suffer for your failures. Arguments clashed and overlapped, voices rising in fear and bitterness. Translation devices crackled with the overload, creating a low buzz like insects crawling through the chamber. None of it changed the simple fact written across every trembling face. They were losing. And they would continue to lose until nothing remained. At the far end of the hall, Counselor Vela pushed herself upright. Her movements were slow, deliberate, as though dragging herself through water. Her feathers, once a radiant blue, were dulled with ash. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but carried across the chamber. You all know what we must do, she said. The noise died instantly. Dozens of faces turned toward her. No, someone muttered. You cannot mean. There is no alternative, Vela interrupted, sharper now. Our fleets have failed. Our strategies have failed. And the enemy does not seek territory or alliance. They are devouring everything in their path. Her eyes swept the room, landing on those who looked away first. We have one chance. One. And it is not with us. The chamber seemed to shrink, the walls pulling closer. You speak of them? The word was spat like poison, but no one dared deny it. For a moment Vela did not answer. She let the weight of the silence crush them further, as though daring someone else to carry the responsibility. None did. Yes, she said at last. The humans. Gasps rippled like a physical wave. Some delegates recoiled as if the very mention would stain them. Others muttered in disbelief. A reptilian envoy curled his tail protectively around his chair. You would call butchers into our war? He growled. Have you forgotten what they did during their own conflicts? They poisoned entire continents just to break resistance. They burned moons to glass. And they survived, Vela shot back. More than survived. They grew. While we debated ethics and policy, they prepared for survival at any cost. Do you not understand? That is why we must ask them. Another counselor leaned forward, mandibles clicking nervously. They will not help us for free. Their kind does not give without taking. Vela's feathers bristled. Perhaps not. But tell me, what do we have left to bargain with? If the enemy continues, none of us will have a world left to defend. The silence stretched again, thicker, more suffocating. Every delegate could hear their own pulse against the translation hum. It was Counselor Aros, elder of his species, who finally let out a dry, rasping breath. Send the transmission. No applause followed. No cheers. Only a hollow quiet as the chamber seemed to acknowledge its own defeat. The scene cut across stars. On Earth, the message arrived in the dead of night. The secure channel opened inside a fortress buried beneath the Rockies, where shadows stretched long over steel walls and humming generators. Admiral Donovan stood in the command room, the only movement in a sea of frozen screens. His uniform was pressed, his jawline hard as stone, but his eyes gave away exhaustion that years of command never washed clean. The hologram flickered to life before him, casting pale blue light across his face. Alien figures bent low, their voices tight with desperation. They begged not as rulers but as survivors. They spoke of fleets torn apart, worlds hollowed to silence, and billions left defenseless. Donovan did not interrupt. He listened, hands folded behind his back, every wrinkle around his mouth cut deeper by the weight of the plea. When the transmission ended, the room held its breath, waiting for his response. He did not ask what the enemy wanted. He did not ask about treaties, alliances, or repayment. Wake the Black Armada, Donovan said. His voice was gravel, quiet but sharp enough to cut through steel. The officers at the room's edges looked up sharply. Some hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. They all knew what that order meant. The Armada had not been touched in decades, sealed in shipyards under oath never to be released unless humanity itself faced annihilation. To unleash it now meant they were not entering a war, they were about to change the shape of it forever. Donovan did not look at them again. His gaze stayed fixed on the blank wall where the hologram had vanished, as if he were staring straight through the stone and steel, into the stars where the enemy already burned its way closer. "Send word to Keen," he added. "Tell her the council begged for help." He paused. The faintest flicker of grim irony touched his expression. "And tell her we're giving it." The first thing the envoys noticed was the silence. When their transport docked at the Terran station above Jupiter, they expected the usual clamor of a military hub, the buzz of voices, the rhythmic clatter of tools, the hum of industry filling the air. Instead, the corridors they stepped into were hushed, stripped of any sound beyond their own footsteps and the faint mechanical thrum of power conduits. Soldiers moved with purpose, not a word wasted, their faces set in expressions that betrayed no curiosity about the aliens in their midst. It was not indifference. It was something colder. Ambassador Thalen, who had carried his people's desperate plea to Earth, found himself clutching the rail tighter as they crossed a long bridge toward the viewing deck. His claws clicked faintly against the polished metal. The humans gave no explanation, no words of welcome, simply guiding them forward with curt gestures. The sense of being tolerated rather than respected gnawed at him. Then the glass wall ahead of them widened into a full panorama, and Thalen forgot how to breathe. Beyond the station, row after row of human warships stretched into the void. Not sleek and elegant, like the ships of the Council races, but dark, jagged things that seemed carved from shadow. Their hulls bore scars that looked deliberate, as though the very armor had been built to intimidate. Gun arrays lined every visible surface, some so massive they dwarfed entire frigates of other species. The ships were positioned in silence, but the formation itself carried menace. Predators lying in wait. Thalen had fought in wars before. He had seen fleets reduced to debris, orbital bombardments turning cities into ash. But never had he stood in the presence of a force that felt less like a navy and more like a weaponized instinct. "These ships," whispered Counselor Vela beside him, her feathers trembling as though every nerve screamed warning. "They are wrong." A human voice answered behind them. "Come, flat. They are effective." Admiral Donovan had joined them, his hands clasped behind his back. No insignia of pride adorned his uniform beyond the simple rank etched on his collar. He did not need them. His presence alone carried the weight of command. "You asked for help," Donovan said, his gaze locked not on the aliens but on the fleet outside. "This is how we give it." He turned and left without another word, expecting them to follow. The flagship Resolute was a monster in its own right, nearly 3 kilometers long, with armor plating layered so thick it looked more like a drifting fortress than a ship. Inside, the envoys found the corridors alive with activity but not chaotic. The humans moved with a strange mixture of precision and indifference, like veterans who had done this too many times before. It was there that Thalen first met Captain Keen. She stood in the hangar bay, shouting at a group of soldiers preparing their dropships. Her voice was sharp but not theatrical, cutting through the air like a blade. "You don't get sloppy because you think the aliens will cover for you. They won't. You don't get sentimental because you want to write a last message home. You'll get your message home when you come back alive. Until then, you do your job or I'll find someone who will." The soldiers did not argue. They adjusted their gear and moved faster. He noticed the envoys then. She didn't smile, didn't bow, didn't even soften her tone. She wiped grease from her hands onto her uniform and walked toward them with a stride that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. "So," she said, looking them over, "you're the ones who begged." Thalen's throat tightened. He wanted to correct her, to remind her that they were representatives of civilizations thousands of years old. That they had not begged, but sought alliance. But the words died in his throat. Something in her eyes made clear that titles and pride meant nothing here. Instead, he said softly, "We are the ones who asked." Keen tilted her head, studying him as though weighing the honesty of his answer. For the first time, her mouth twitched, not quite a smile but something close. "Good. Then you understand why we're here." She turned back to her soldiers, barking another order, and the envoys were left standing in her shadow, feeling smaller than they had in the council chamber surrounded by fire. Hours later, from the observation deck of the Resolute, they saw the full fleet preparing for departure. Dock clamps released in perfect synchronization, engines ignited with a low thunder that rattled through the ship's bones. The armada did not surge forward with a roar. It slid into formation with eerie quiet, every vessel locking into place as though choreographed. Thalen's companion whispered in their own tongue, a word that needed no translation. "Predators." The humans said nothing. At the center of the fleet, Donovan gave the only order necessary. "Set course for Tares." The stars stretched, the void twisted, and the black armada vanished into the dark. The aliens, still shaken, wonder if they have summoned salvation or unleashed something far worse. And ahead, the colony of Teres is already burning. The colony skies bled fire. From the balcony of Teres' central tower, Governor Anil watched orbital defenses flicker out one by one. Each detonation flashed across the heavens like a dying star, and each left a silence more suffocating than the last. The comms in her ear hissed with overlapping voices, broken by screams, static, and the sudden emptiness of channels going dead. She had heard many words in her life as a leader, but she had never heard so much silence. Around her, aides hurried civilians into the subterranean shelters, their movements frantic, terrified. Children clung to parents. Medics shouted for help carrying the wounded down stairwells already packed shoulder to shoulder. The invaders had cut through 3 of Teres' defense fleets, and their ships now hung above the city like predators circling wounded prey. Anil whispered a prayer under her breath, though she had long ago stopped believing. In orbit, the remnants of the local fleet scattered in disarray. Small vessels darted between debris fields, chased by enemy fire that cut them apart with effortless precision. No formation remained, no command structure, only the desperate instinct to survive one more moment. Counselor Vela's cruiser shuddered under another glancing strike, its hull shrieking as alarms howled through the decks. Officers screamed reports at one another, none of them carrying hope. "They are playing with us," one gasped, clutching his console. "They strike where we run, never where we fight back." Vela gripped the rail with talons digging into the metal. The thought clawed at her mind, had they made a mistake? Had they placed their last hope in the wrong hands? Then space tore open. The armada arrived. It was not with light or song or the graceful arcs of council fleets. It was with silence, followed by the sudden shadow of hundreds of dark shapes sliding out of warp. The Resolute appeared first, its massive bulk blotting out the stars. Then came the rest, ship after ship unfurling like a blade drawn from its sheath. They did not spread in panic or scatter like prey. They moved as one, a single predator circling its kill. "Contact," Donovan said from the flagship's command throne. His voice did not rise, did not carry the weight of ceremony. It was as though he were announcing a weather report. On the tactical display, enemy vessels adjusted formation, turning toward the humans with clear intent to engage. Donovan's expression did not shift. Keen. Captain Keen stood, her hands clasped behind her back, eyes narrowing at the display. She gave a single nod. "Engage." The first salvo struck like thunder. Human cruisers cut into the enemy line with coordinated precision, weapons flaring bright against the void. Torpedoes streaked through the debris fields, ripping enemy ships into fragments that spiraled like broken glass. Railguns fired in disciplined rhythm, each impact punching through hulls with bone-shaking violence. The council envoys, watching from the Resolute's observation deck, staggered under the sheer ferocity. Their own fleets had fired in measured volleys, cautious and tactical. Humanity fought like something else entirely. Their guns spoke in endless rhythm, a ceaseless beat that refused to slow until the target ceased to exist. Inside the dropships, Marines prepared for boarding. Armor sealed, rifles checked, voices low but steady. Some muttered jokes about the food back home, others tapped the grips of their weapons like superstitious charms. Commander Mercer moved among them, his face drawn tight but calm, stopping to clap a shoulder here, adjust a strap there. "You're not dying today," he said to one soldier whose hands shook too hard to reload his sidearm. "Not until I say you're allowed to." The soldier grinned weakly, tension broken just enough to steady his aim. When the boarding alarms rang, Mercer's dropship launched. The fighting inside the enemy station was savage. Corridors became killing grounds, every corner an ambush, every doorway a trap. Humans pushed forward regardless, trading flesh for ground, their advance measured in blood. Mercer led from the front, rifle barking in short, brutal bursts. He moved with practiced instinct, pulling a wounded Marine behind cover one moment, driving a knife into an enemy's throat the next. At one point he stumbled into a chamber lined with pods, each filled with bodies drained of color, their veins marked by black threads that pulsed faintly. The sight froze him while rising in his throat. "God!" a Marine whispered behind him. Mercer didn't answer. He put a bullet through the nearest pod, then another until the chamber filled with smoke and fire. Only then did he move again, faster, angrier, as though momentum alone could burn the image from his memory. Hours passed. The battle outside raged with no less ferocity. Alien ships burned in the skies of Teres, their hulks raining down through the atmosphere. Human losses mounted too, entire frigates collapsing under concentrated fire, dropships shredded before reaching their targets. Victory did not come cheap. But slowly, inexorably, the tide shifted. Enemy formations faltered under the relentless pressure. Their ships were designed for intimidation, not endurance, and the humans tore them apart piece by piece. Where the Council's fleets had fractured and retreated, the Armada pressed forward without pause, indifferent to casualties. Each death was absorbed into the momentum of the whole. Governor Anil looked up through the smoke-filled sky as the last enemy cruiser broke apart, scattering debris in a flaming arc. She could not believe it. Against everything she had witnessed, against every report of defeat, the humans had driven the invaders back. For the first time in days she felt breath in her lungs. On the bridge of the Resolute, Keen gave the order to stand down. The guns fell silent, leaving only the echoes of burning wreckage drifting across the void. Her officers reported casualties, ship losses, and damage assessments. She listened, face unreadable. Mercer returned from the boarding action hours later, his armor scorched, his eyes bloodshot. He reported to Keen without ceremony, his voice flat. Station neutralized. But there's something you'll want to see. She glanced at Donovan, who nodded once. Together they followed Mercer to the lower decks, where the prisoner cells now held the captured enemy commander. The alien was bound, its flesh pale and twitching as though something inside it still pulsed with hunger. Its eyes, black endless, fixed on the humans with a strange calm. When it finally spoke, the translator stuttered over its rasping words. You believe this was victory. Its mouth curled into something that might have been a smile. But we were never meant to win here. Keen felt the cold settle in her chest. Donovan's expression remained stone, but his hand tightened slightly behind his back. The alien leaned forward, chains rattling softly. They were only scouts. The council chamber aboard the Resolute smelled of ozone and cold steel. Human officers had ceded the space reluctantly, their faces tight with disdain, leaving the alien delegates alone to argue beneath the shadow of a ship they could barely comprehend. Holographic projections flickered above the table, displaying the scale of destruction at Teres, enemy wreckage drifting in orbit, the blackened curve of the colony's atmosphere, the jagged scars of bombardment still glowing red along the surface. The silence lasted barely a moment. They cannot be trusted. Counselor Reth hissed, his scaled tail lashing against the floor. You saw what they unleashed. Their fleets fight like berserkers. They lost entire companies of soldiers and spoke of it as though it were routine. These humans are not allies, they are executioners. Vela's feathers bristled, but she kept her voice steady. And without them you would be nothing but ash. You saw what those invaders did to your colonies before Teres. Would you rather be annihilated with dignity than survive with fear? That is not the choice, another delegate snapped. The choice is whether we allow butchers to run loose through our war. Their voices rose and tangled, bitter and desperate, until the translator drones strained to keep pace. Fear dripped into every word. For every delegate who argued that humanity was salvation, another insisted they were an even greater threat. The doors hissed open. Admiral Donovan stepped inside with no escort, his boots striking the floor in unhurried rhythm. The argument stumbled into silence. The humans had not been invited into this session, but none of the delegates dared protest as Donovan walked past them to the center of the table. His eyes scanned the holographic displays without interest. You're wasting time, he said flatly. A few of the delegates shifted uncomfortably. Vela leaned forward. Then speak, Admiral. Tell us what you believe. Donovan clasped his hands behind his back. What I believe doesn't matter. What I know is this. The enemy that struck Teres wasn't an army. It was an advance team. A probe. They wanted to see how you'd break and you obliged. He turned his head slowly, his eyes sweeping across the chamber. Now their real fleet is coming. And it won't be tomorrow. It won't be next week. It will be here before you finish your next round of arguments. A ripple of unease spread across the room. Reth bared his teeth. And you claim your armada can stop them? Donovan's jaw tightened. No fleet in this galaxy can stop them. But ours is the only one that can hurt them badly enough to make them bleed. He let the silence sit. Then he left, the doors hissing shut behind him. The council sat frozen in the emptiness he left behind. On the lower decks, the price of Teres was written in faces rather than words. Rows of injured soldiers lined the med bays, their armor peeled away, skin scorched or torn. Some groaned softly under painkillers, others stared at the ceiling without blinking, their minds still trapped in fire and blood. Medics moved between them with practiced speed, exhaustion dragging their shoulders. Mercer walked the aisle quietly, stopping at bedsides where Marines raised tired hands in half-hearted salutes. He never returned them. He leaned down, murmured something only they could hear, then moved on. Sometimes he left a hand on a shoulder a little longer. Sometimes he lingered in silence beside a Marine whose eyes would never open again. When he finally stepped out, Keen was waiting for him in the corridor. Her expression was hard, but her voice held no sharpness. "You shouldn't carry it all, Mercer." He met her gaze. "Somebody has to." They stood in silence for a moment, the ship's hum filling the gap. Finally she said, "You think I don't carry it? You think Donovan doesn't? That's what leadership is. It doesn't end when the battle does. It never does." Mercer let out a breath through clenched teeth, his eyes closing briefly. "We're not leaders, Keen. We're gravediggers." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She only turned and walked with him toward the command decks. Preparations consumed the armada. Ships were repaired at breakneck speed, engineers working in shifts so long they could barely stand. Weapons were reloaded, some from stockpiles so old the markings on the crates had faded to nothing. Commanders reviewed battle records in silence, noting every weakness the enemy had exposed. On the mess decks, soldiers sat in small groups, eating rations that tasted of metal and salt. Conversation was clipped, jokes hollow. A few laughed anyway, the kind of laughter that lived on the edge of despair. "If I don't come back," one Marine muttered, "delete my debts." Another replied without missing a beat, "If you don't come back, I'm claiming your boots." The table chuckled. But no one smiled for long. In the officers' ready room, Keen and Donovan stood over the tactical map of the dying star system where the next battle would unfold. The enemy's reinforcements were already on the move, their numbers dwarfing anything the humans had faced before. "They'll come straight through the debris fields," Keen said, tracing a line with her finger. "Force us to fight in close quarters." Donovan nodded slightly. "And you'll let them. They think we avoid close combat. They don't understand we thrive in it." Keen's brow furrowed. "We'll lose half the fleet. Better half than all." She stared at him for a moment, then leaned forward. "You've already decided this ends here, haven't you?" Donovan's face gave nothing away. "No. I've decided this is where it begins." When the enemy fleet arrived, it was like watching the horizon turn into a storm. One ship became 10. 10 became 100. 100 became so many the void itself seemed to bend beneath their mass. Their hulls glimmered with strange, pulsing lines of energy, weapons swelling with the glow of charging power. The humans moved first. The armada surged into the chaos, tearing through debris fields with suicidal precision. Fighters screamed ahead, weaving through asteroids that tumbled under weapons fire. Cruisers cut sudden arcs, slamming through enemy formations with point-blank barrages. Where alien allies had always hesitated, the humans pressed harder, their momentum carrying them deeper into the heart of the storm. The battle became a furnace. Ships burned and died in clusters, wreckage colliding to form fields of fire. Entire squadrons vanished under enemy barrages, only for replacements to drive through the wreckage, guns already firing. Keen's voice filled the comms, clipped and cold. "Stay in formation. Keep pressure on their left flank. You give them space, they'll bury us all." Mercer's boarding companies launched again, dropships diving straight through fire that should have destroyed them. Many didn't make it. The ones that did tore into the enemy with a fury that looked more like vengeance than survival. On the bridge of the Resolute, Donovan watched it all with unblinking calm. Reports came in, losses mounted, but the line held. The humans were bleeding the enemy just as he had promised. Then the sensors lit up with something new. At the edge of the system, the enemy's largest ship appeared. It dwarfed even the Resolute, a silhouette so massive it seemed to eclipse the dying star behind it. Energy radiated from its core, not in weapons fire but in a concentrated beam that reached toward the star itself. Keen's hand tightened on the console. They're feeding on it. The star flared, unstable, its light twisting unnaturally as the enemy vessel drew its energy. Every officer on the bridge felt the cold settle over them, the realization that this was not another fleet engagement. This was something else. The silence stretched across the command deck as the star's glow dimmed further, and the enemy weapon began to awaken. The warfront over Drenhall burned like a second sun. Human warships carved across the sky, beams of ion light and plasma burst shattering through enemy formations. The Harridan fleet moved with terrifying precision, each maneuver sharpened by centuries of doctrine born from Earth's wars. What had once been alien dreadnoughts, feared across the stars, now broke apart under a storm of concentrated human firepower. From the bridge of the Resolute, Commander Rourke watched as another hostile carrier split into two molten halves. The battle map bloomed red icons, enemy signatures collapsing one after another, but his expression didn't soften. Victory here was brutal, costly, and not yet secure. Status of the 7th? He asked, his voice steady, though he already feared the answer. Minimal response. Their line broke. Casualties? Lieutenant Braxton hesitated, her throat tightening. Too many. Rourke leaned against the railing, jaw set. The price was steep, and every ship lost carried not only soldiers but the trust of the desperate allies who had begged Earth for salvation. He thought back to those trembling diplomats, their eyes wide with fear when they had come crawling to humanity for help. They had not understood what it meant, what it would cost, when humans agreed. Hold the flanks. Push them into our kill box, he ordered, voice carrying no trace of doubt. Below in the hangar, Captain Reyes slammed her helmet into place. Her squad's dropships shook as they descended through the chaos, a rain of burning hull fragments streaking around them. She glanced at her second-in-command, Matheson, whose usual sarcasm had gone silent. His jaw clenched as if words might break his focus. You good? She asked over comms. I'll complain after we survive, he muttered, pulling his harness tight. Reyes allowed herself a thin smile before the dropship bucked under a near miss. The floor rattled, sparks sprayed across the ceiling, but they held. She braced, muscles tight, as the ramp began to lower, revealing the surface of Drenhall. Cities smoldered beneath clouds of black smoke. Alien civilians huddled in the ruins, their figures small, fragile, against the enormity of war. The squad stormed out into the chaos. Plasma fire streaked past, alien war machines towering overhead. Reyes barked orders, driving her people forward through shattered streets, every step a fight against overwhelming firepower. This wasn't about conquest. This was survival, and not just for humans. In one collapsed square they found them, the ones who had begged for aid. The counselors of Drenhall, trapped beneath the rubble of their own Senate building. Their bodies were bruised, their faces pale with fear, but their eyes lit with desperate recognition when they saw Reyes's squad. You came, one of them rasped, voice trembling. Reyes hauled him to his feet, slinging his arm across her shoulders. We don't leave people behind, she said. Overhead, another fleet descended from hyperspace. The scanner screamed across Rourke's bridge, flooding the displays with hostile contacts. The comms filled with overlapping voices, shouts of panic and confusion. It's not reinforcements, Braxton whispered, staring at the wave of new signatures. It's another fleet. Twice the size. The crew fell into silence. The air itself felt heavier. Rourke's knuckles whitened on the railing, his breath steady but slow. On the surface, Reyes felt the ground quake. Dust rained from broken ceilings as the civilians looked to the skies, their faces paling under the flicker of red light. She glanced upward, her heart pounding at the sudden, unnatural glow that spread across the clouds. Matheson muttered, "That doesn't look like mercy." Reyes didn't answer. She simply raised her rifle, jaw tight, as the heavens filled with shapes no one had expected. And above it all, the Harridan fleet prepared to turn, battered but unbroken, ready to face whatever came next.